Welcome back to the Jyotish project. My name is Sachin Sharma, and this is How to Study Jyotish series that we're doing. This is the second lecture of the series, The Inner Posture of a Jyotish Student. So it's going to be an interesting one. Let's get right into it. So the objective is to clarify the inner posture required to approach Jyotish, not as information to be acquired, but as a darshana that reshapes perception. This is also something that we touched upon in lecture one, but that was from a different angle, a little bit of a different grounding. Now we are seeing it as what kind of posture is required to be able to receive Jyotish the correct way. So we will explore the essential qualities that make one receptive to this knowledge, the distortions that obstruct it, and the role of rhythm, sincerity, and relationship in authentic study. So, this lecture examines how study becomes tapas, how attention becomes the site of transformation, and how the real learning begins not with memorization, but with becoming the kind of seer who can truly see. And this is not seer in this ancient manner of this enlightened being, but just someone, an analyst. An analyst is someone who's trying to pattern recognize and being able to see through those patterns and different kinds of probabilities through the structures that, in the first place, create those patterns. So let's get right into it. Overview. So these are the 7 sections: why method matters, what must be cultivated, what must be avoided, the Guru Shishya approach to learning, how to study Jyotish, your role as a student, and what this lecture has shown us. So it will be like an overview at the end of sort of a revision of all the other sections that we've covered in some sense. So let's get into it. Why method matters. So before we can approach Jyotish as a body of knowledge, we must ask, how will we approach it at all? So before we understand what's inside of Jyotish, what the grahas, the bhavas, the rashis, the techniques, the dashas, and all of the things in Jyotish, how will we approach it? How do we orient ourselves? How do we approach? What kind of student do we need to become to be able to receive that kind of understanding? So most people rush towards technique. They want to understand charts, including me. I did this and I wasted at least 3 to 4 years in approaching Jyotish in this way. So this lecture, this series, How to Study Jyotish, is coming from a pain point. It's coming from a deep pain. It's coming, it'll save us time. If we understand this, if you understand this, it'll save you a lot of lost months or years, maybe even. So we want to understand charts, combinations, outcomes for good reason. Why not? But we rarely pause to consider what kind of mind is doing the studying itself. What kind of manas do we need to create? What kind of receptivity is even required to be able to sit for these kinds of ideas to even be uh, propagated into our psyche? So, what kind of posture is being brought to the material? That posture determines everything. So the method of study is not just a strategy, it's a container. If the container is unstable, even profound teachings cannot settle. And this is what we see. A lot of indigestion happens when you get into technique oriented astrology, and it's all about prediction. And the better the technique and the better the prediction, the better the astrologer. And we see a lot of indigestion and a lot of instability. And over time, either the astrologer quits the profession or it's just, you see, uh, misuses it further, is something that is really sad. So if the container is rigid, nothing can move. But if the container is held with clarity and flexibility, learning becomes something more than accumulation. It becomes transformation. It changes. Transformation for the better, because transformation can also be for the worse. Transformation usually in a positive sense. Avoid fear, avoid overwhelm. Do not burden yourself with the idea that you must become a perfect person in order to begin. That is not what we are saying in this lecture. It's important to state this. All the ideas that we're going to discuss in this lecture are not for us to get more fearful and more overwhelmed and feel more broken in our imperfections and then create a distance between Jyotish and ourselves. It's the opposite. We want to understand what's required, and through humility and sincerity, be like, it's okay. I may not have all of these things in me, but I at least am aware of these things, what is required. And if my study is a bit slower than usual, then maybe some of these things that I need to have as a student, I just need to focus on those things and cultivate that aspects of my psyche, and then I'll be able to study better, be able to do it more. So the fact that you're here, drawn to Jyotish, interested in this darshan, means something in you has already begun the shift. So the shift has already started. The fact that you've clicked on this video, you want to, you're still listening to what is being discussed, and maybe it's resonating. It's sort of making you feel, yes, like I want to know what kind of student can wield Jyotish the right way. So you're already there in your sincerity, in that openness to receive some kind of understanding. So that matters, and for now it's enough. That's what we need for now. So depth will not arrive through pressure. We're not supposed to pressure ourselves. It will come through repetition, inquiry, and contact. Contact meaning dialogue, inquiry meaning more contemplation, more working with the material itself that we're studying, and repetition, which is over time, through many charts, through many discussions, by repeating the materials itself, they start getting grounded into deeper layers of your psyche as you even live your life. So you need to experience more life as well while receiving these ideas. So you don't need to grasp everything on the first pass. The first time you go through a lecture, when you first time you study Jyotish, an idea that is presented in Jyotish about grahas, or in the Rahu Ketu lectures, the Rahu Ketu files, that's another series that we're doing. If you study a lecture, if you study something about Rahu and Ketu, something makes sense, something doesn't make sense. The next time when you'll view the lecture, there'll be things that you, depending on where you are, because transits are always changing, your mind is oriented differently, all the planets are in different place, so you'll access or focus on different part of that same lecture. That same different aspect of the same lecture will become more evident, more available to you, depending on that day's orientation. So let the material wash over you, let it confuse you, let it open something, move through it lightly, even quickly at first, and then return. And this is a mistake that I made. A lot of the times they were advanced concepts. I did beginner stuff like 3 or 4 times before permitting myself to go to something intermediate. So I would keep studying the meanings of grahas like many times before moving to, let's say, certain combinations or certain avasthas, certain states of the grahas. And I would like pressure myself not to get into it for like 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, and keep staying stuck in the first part of it, because I wanted to like really get it right before I could permit myself to move. And I realized, and when I actually did move on to the next part, the first parts, the beginner stuff, actually became more clear to me. And then I did the intermediate stuff, and I went back to the beginner stuff, and it gave me a better grounding of what was being discussed, of the ideas, of the nuances of what was being shared by Rishi Parāśara. So in the first go, whenever you're studying anything in Jyotish, move through the stuff lightly. Don't take it too seriously. Quickly, with curiosity, with fun. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the learning. We'll enjoy it with fascination, and then return. And depth will come not through this pressure of perfection of some sort, through repetition, inquiry, and contact, and also compassion if you don't understand things in the first go. For yourself, compassion for yourself. So let the act of returning become a part of your method. Repetition itself become part of your method. Insight, especially in Jyotish, comes more from circular rhythm than from linear mastery. And honestly, any astrologer, any Jyotishi would tell you this, because Jyotishis still discuss graha significations, and they're like, "Oh, I figured this thing out about Saturn, and I figured this thing about Jupiter. It makes so much sense." And they'll have a logic and give an example, and two or three Jyotishis will have a conversation and get fascinated by this new understanding about a very fundamental and a very beginner concept. So insight in Jyotish comes from circular rhythm, returning back, and then the circular thing becomes more like a spiral, and you start moving up and down this spiral. Not from this linear thing that I finished this topic, it's done, I did it 3 years ago, I never need to return. Return to the basics, return to the intermediate stuff, and your advanced stuff will become more advanced. You'll be able to do more research. So at times you may feel unqualified. You may think, I'm not disciplined enough, I'm not spiritual enough, or this is too complex for me. And all of these are blocks that I felt, I continue to feel at times. And it really slows down the studies, and it really creates a lot of confusion. A lot of different kinds of social pressures or financial pressures can stop the studies. And that curiosity, that fundamental mercurial kind of wanting to try and error kind of like curiosity of this newly discovered information, that new concepts to make sense of, frameworks and concepts to make sense of life with, get lost because of this kinds of inner voices, these kinds of ideas. So, but this isn't about discipline in the rigid sense. It's certainly not about purity or performance. This is about learning to see. And vision doesn't belong to the best student. It belongs to the one who keeps returning to the mirror. So the Jyotish, literally, the more time you spend with it, the better you get at it. Considering there's some fundamental proper orientation, some people probably get worse with it if they don't return to it with sincerity and clarity and beginner's sort of mind. It generally you ages wi- with you into more refinement through more experience and understanding and contemplation. So, what is the method? Why method matters? We covered. So, what is the method? Keep showing up. Keep one of the things that worked really well for me. I was at some point, I was just like, I'm going to take one class every day. I'm going to study 1 hour every day. And I had three jobs because I needed uh, I come from a very normal sort of humble family background, and so I just needed I was what, 21, 22, 23 that time. I was doing multiple jobs, and by the end of the day I would just sit for half an hour or 1 hour and just study. A lot of it was haphazard study from YouTube and stuff, and I literally had to unlearn all of that stuff that I had acquired, but it kept me in touch in some sense. And doing it wrong actually made me understand a lot of. So there's just get into all kinds of understanding. At some point, doing the wrong thing makes the right thing more self-evident. Darkness makes light more evident. Stay honest about your progress, how much time it would take, what it means to study the subject. What's your motivation, what's your unconscious motivation. Some people have all kinds of weird things about wanting to some narcissistic sort of personality types also get into a lot of spiritual work, like these kinds of ideas and stuff, and then it creates a lot of hassle. Usually they're quite blind to it. And yeah, so honesty would be important. Don't rush, but don't freeze. So don't slow down too much at the point of freezing, which the mistake that I make. And don't rush. Don't try to go too fast. Go through the material at your own pace. Sometimes you want to take 5 lectures a day. Take 5 lectures. Sometimes you don't want to take any lecture. Just stay in touch. Just study for like 15, 20 minutes or think about it for a bit. Don't rush, but don't freeze. Move and return. Keep returning back, but keep movement, which again comes to the idea of repetition, memorization of some sort, at least some sort of grounding in. The moment you understand it, you wouldn't have to retain it. You wouldn't have to memorize in this rote manner. You'll be able to just invoke that idea in your heart, because the understanding sank or went into your seeped into your heart. So you don't need to really remember it in that fashion, because you sort of start embodying it. Let the structure guide you, but don't demand understanding before you move. So let the structured studies are better, planned studies are better. Let it guide you, but don't demand understanding before you move. Don't be like, I don't get understand Jyotish. I've studied the grahas, rashis, and it sort of makes sense. I don't know. There'll be many, many pieces to the puzzle. And when you start putting it together, the whole picture becomes clear over time. It's a subtle art. It requires nuance and a subtle heart to sort of grasp. And then it starts becoming more and more obvious. What was once subtle becomes more obvious with practice. The structure of this course or any course matters. But more important than the structure is your relationship to it. You can't move too fast, you can stagnate, you can hold it too tightly and lose the rhythm. But if you meet it gently with sincerity, openness, and rhythm, something extraordinary can begin to unfold. Because the truth is, you're not just studying Jyotish, you're letting Jyotish also study you. So while you study Jyotish and realize things and understand things, it'll also move you in different ways. So it's not a linear process of studying medicine. Like you become a doctor, but your personal habits are not the healthiest. That's a lot of the doctors have a very standard lifestyle. They can do good, okay work as a doctor, but they don't sort of live a healthy lifestyle themselves. But with Jyotish, which is also true with Jyotish actually, but the idea is for Jyotish to also have an impact, make changes in us, how we are perceiving ourselves about reality and things like that. The truth is that we're not just studying Jyotish. Jyotish is also sort of studying us. It also makes an impact on us. What must be cultivated? Jyotish is not absorbed by cleverness. It is not awakened by curiosity alone, though they help. It does not open itself to merely intellectual or to those who treat it like a system to be decoded and conquered. It is received by those who are willing to be refined by it. It is a heart based practice. It is a sort of a discipline, an art, an internal art. It has a method. It will eventually become very scientific once we start figuring out all the issues, once we start addressing all the issues and proper kind of research can take place. But it is not something like a thing to be suffocated, like you just read and rote memorize it and then you can just conquer it in some sense. Rishi Parāśara, the seer who gave form to much of what we now call Jyotish, knew this. He did not begin his teachings with a formulae, or calculations. He began with a warning and with a recognition that the inner condition of the student is a real determining factor in whether Jyotish will yield its fruits. And that's what it is also like in Buddha's teachings, Maharishi Gautam, which is Buddha Buddha's teaching, in Patanjali's teaching, all these Maharishis have given in their teachings, first they are sort of preparing the ground. So Patanjali Yoga Sutras prepare the ground with yamas, niyamas, which are the same, the eightfold path in Buddhism, the right view, right action, all the different various lists and all the three jewels and this and that, all different kinds of propensities, proclivities, all the cleanliness, purification, all the understanding that needs to happen for you to prepare to attain a certain level of awareness. It's this is the case in any discipline. And so in Jyotish also, Rishi Parashar starts with this. He gives this sutra within the first chapter of Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. He says, in one of these opening sutras, he writes, Shantai guru-bhaktai sarvada satyavadine astikaya pradatavyam tatah shreyo hyavapasyati. Hyavapasyati. So I'm learning to recite Sanskrit sutras properly. This is in Anushtup Chandas meter. And it says this knowledge is to be given only to the peaceful, the Shantai, the devoted to the Guru, the ever truthful, and the one full of faith. Then true benefit will arise. So these are not moral traits, they are perceptual prerequisites. They point to a certain kind of mind, a certain kind of inner landscape that is required for this darshan to begin working inwardly, not just intellectually. both intellectually and inwardly. It wouldn't work otherwise. So these are, and obviously when you read a sutra like this, you're like, maybe it's true, maybe, because initially when I started studying Jyotish, no one goes through these sutras. In chapter 1, chapter 2, everyone skips. Chapter 3 is the main chapter. You learn about all the grahas and their indications. You go to Rashi's, Bhavas, you get into techniques, you know, start predicting. One of my astrology students, Vedic astrology teachers, sorry, initially in 2014-15, used to say, "Oh, in 3 days I can teach you Jaimini Upadesha Sutras of Rishi Jaimini. 3 days, it's nothing. Parashara Hora, once you studied Parashara Hora, Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, Parashari Jyotish, he used to say, you in 3 days, Jaimini Upadeshas will be mastered." And for the first about 4 to 5 years, I had so many teachers and so many bad experiences which I didn't know were bad, which I realized later on that how much distortion was there and what the wrong kind of information knowledge I was being taught, because none of them had this. And now that I recall all of my earlier teachers, they weren't peaceful, content people. They didn't have shanti. They didn't have a guru. They had a teacher. They had more astrology teachers and stuff. They didn't have a proper spiritual master, or some kind of, at least some kind of good mentor, if you want to use the word guru like that. The ever truthful, they were probably, but true, they were true. I don't know if they were truthful or not truthful. I cannot judge that. One full of faith. This is a nuanced one. We'll discuss what this means. And benefit was not arising. Like when I saw what kind of students they had and the discussions they were having and the kinds of things they were trying to do with Jyotish, apply Jyotish in the ways they were trying to apply Jyotish, wanted to predict death, they wanted to, all of these kinds of things, all interpretations were very negative, all about warning and freaking people out. They were themselves very freaked out. And this is not one teacher, many class, like many groups, communities, and many teachers. And it was always this kind of thing, because this wasn't there. And Rishi Parāśara opens with this. He tells Maitreya, which who himself is a rishi, of very learned Dvijottam, uh, Uttamam, the best amongst the Dvija. Dvija is not in the sense that it is interpreted now. Dvija meaning that the twice born, that is the one who has the first state of awareness. He has realized that that individual has glimpsed once that they're not the body mind, or they've accessed a subtler state of mind once at least. So they are now twice born. They're reborn into this human form. So that's how I see Dvij. That's how my teachers have taught me what Dvij means. So these are not moral traits, they're perceptual prerequisites. They're prerequisite, they're the foundation which would allow Jyotish to flower properly. So they point to a certain kind of mind, a certain kind of inner landscape that is required for this darshan to begin working inwardly, not just intellectually. Let's briefly explore each one. Shantah. Shantah. Peaceful. This is not about passivity. It's about interior stillness, a mind that is not perpetually agitated. It's difficult. I have none of these actually. If trust me, I have none of these, but I at least know this is what I need. So when I'm not understanding Jyotish the right way, I know because I don't have these qualities on some fundamental level. So that's why I'll keep struggling with Jyotish. So these are not for us to contract. I still study Jyotish, I still love Jyotish, but I know why my understanding of Jyotish is flawed, because I don't have these qualities. Uh, it's about interior stillness, a mind that is not perpetually agitated, distracted, or reactive. A Shanta student may still feel intense things, may still struggle, but there is a baseline willingness to be quiet, to not fill every gap with thought. Jyotish requires space, it requires akash, and space requires peace. In fact, space will naturally inspire peace. Guru Bhaktah. Guru Bhakta means devoted to the teacher. And here, Guru can be applied on different levels. One level is your mundane teacher, your mentor, and one level is your spiritual teacher, your master who takes care of your Atma. This is not blind loyalty, and this has been completely distorted. The word Guru has been hijacked, has been distorted by false gurus and by the modern way it's been adapted and used, which is, it is what it is. But still, the sanctity of the word Guru has to be restored. It is being restored. This is not blind loyalty. It is definitely not personality worship. It is reverence that naturally arises because of what has happened, the loving relationship between the. It's not a forced fear based relationship. It's a naturally a feeling of devotion, a natural feeling of understanding comes because a certain process has happened between the teacher and the student, whether the student really liked an idea, a concept that the teacher said, and the student feels, oh, my teacher is so intelligent, I really like learning from them, they are making me more intelligent, they're making my life easier in some sense. So it is reverence that comes from this transmission of knowledge, of understanding, a willingness to learn from someone who sees further, to trust the path that is older than oneself, someone who has walked the path a little more. It's just a senior student. To suspend constant intellectual resistance, which is insincere. Create resistance, create skepticism, doubt, ask questions, but sincerely. Devotion here means receptivity. Without it, the teaching hits a wall. You need to have some sort of willingness to, like, I'm here to learn. At least that has to be there. On a basic level, that guru bhakta, that bhakti feeling is like, I am here to receive something. Once I've received, and once that reception has benefited me, that what I have received have benefited me, my bhakti will deepen, and the bhakti keeps getting keeps deepening as the relationship and the understanding grows. Satyavadi, truthful. So this goes beyond telling the truth in speech, which is also a part, very basic first step. It means being truthful with oneself, with one's motives, projections, and assumptions. So becoming self aware. It requires self awareness. And a lot of Jyotishis and students, especially, have not gone through and experienced their own biases and own unconscious, their own prarabdha, own birth chart. And it is what it is for whatever complex reasons, maybe that's how it needs to be. But it means being truthful with oneself, with one's motives, projections, and assumptions. To be Satyavadi is to resist self deception, self sabotage of all kind. And then you wouldn't also deceive others. It is to let go of performance, of needing to appear right or spiritual or smart. It is to see what is, even when it's uncomfortable. And these are the kinds of qualities we need as students of Jyotish. And we struggle, but we should be aware that this is what we need. So at least we can strive towards this in all, even if, and keep failing. Probably I keep failing, and then it's just breaks you down so that you become more humble in our failure of trying to reach that ideal. And in that humility, we become more sincere and study with more vigilance and more attention. So the next word is astikaha. So astik philosophy and this astik word, how it's used is not how I use it. It's not the right understanding, I believe. Astik is used as those who don't who believe in Vedas, authority of the Vedas, and Nastik is those who don't believe in the authority of the Vedas. So Sankhya turns into a Astik darshan for some reason. Though Sankhya does not believe in the authorities of the Vedas in the traditional mundane understanding, though I don't believe there is that thing is not there in my personal view, how I've read these texts and what I've accessed. Astika simply means faithful. This is not in the religious sense, but in the sense of shraddha, a trust in the unseen, an openness to that possibility. Being skeptical is okay, but taking skepticism as the only stance until proven otherwise, that the closeness that comes with that It's very unconscious. It's a bias of the sort that I'm just skeptical because for the sake of being skeptical. An openness to that possibility. Like how you enter a physics or a chemistry or a biology lecture, you haven't learned anything. You don't know if physics is true, but you're open to it because many people have spoken of physics as like all these laws of thermodynamics and all of these different laws have been proven. You don't know it yet. You haven't read, you don't know even these laws, maybe. You just enter the classroom and you have this openness, you have this faith. That's the first step of being astic. And then it deepens. It becomes more heartfelt and real once you experience Jyotish more and more. So, willingness to admit that reality is not limited to what the senses can measure, just openness to that 0.1% probability that life moves according to deeper laws. Something is there about karma, dharma, causality, and beyond. And that Jyotish is one method of tracing that movement. Without this faith, Jyotish becomes hollow techniques. It loses its axis. And this has to be, it's a heartfelt conditioning that needs to be done within the student through practice. And this can also turn into blind belief, which is a very common thing in Jyotish and astrology circles where people just believe in astrology. They haven't thought about it. So, under pressure, the whole thing collapses. And they're numerologists, tarot readers, face readers, and also Jyotishis. Oh, yeah, yeah. Vedic astrology is in the same level as tarot reading and all of. That's the problem because we haven't seen that Jyotish is a darshan. It's a shastric vidyā. It's something else. It's different. It's not tarot. It's not meaning making. It's not based on synchronicity of the mundane kind. It's profound. It's study of prarabdha, of this whole profound, absolutely mind blowing metaphysics. But anyway, so none of these are fixed traits. You're not born with them or without them. Some of us have more of these qualities, probably. Some of us have less, and we all cultivate them. Some of us are born with a little. Some people are generally have a capacity to devote themselves more easily to things. Some people have too much closedness and sort of outright rejection. They are to be, but are what works, what's useful, the orientation that's useful is cultivation, the capacity to cultivate these qualities once after becoming aware of them. And every time we study a chart, sit with the teaching, or reflect sincerely, we are deepening these qualities within us. These are not just preconditions for study. When you cultivate these, something shifts. The graha begins to be understood more clearly. Jyotish begins to respond, not as content, but as patterned light. That's the beginning of real learning. That's when Jyotish, for the first time, you move from this childish fascination to this factual seriousness. It's like, whoa, like this is actually real. I mean, it was fun when I was doing these kinds of understanding these kinds of concepts and trying to practice and apply it in my birth chart. But it's also so fascinating that it always plays itself out like that. What is reality? How is it unfolding? What's the structure of this reality then if this actually came out to be true? And an important idea here is these are not just preconditions for study. As you study Jyotish, these qualities naturally start becoming a part of the person if Jyotish is being grounded in the right kind of philosophy. So what must be avoided? So, just as certain qualities prepare the ground for insight, other tendencies actively block it. So, Parashara is not vague about this. Maharishi Parashara, right after, so he within the first chapter he's giving these sutras. He names them very directly, not to shame or exclude, but to protect. This is not to moralize. It's not about right or wrong. It's about this would work and this would not work. It's not about you should not slap. Yes, you should not. But if you slap, it hurts the other person. It creates a certain issue, and you might get slapped in return, or you might get triple slapped in some way, and that would really create a cycle of violence. So it's not about right or wrong, which it could be seen at that could be put that way, but it's about the nuanced dynamics that take place. That if you don't have these qualities, naturally Jyotish will not help you out. If you have those qualities, the ones we just discussed before, these that we're going to discuss now, you're going to be able to grasp and progress in your study faster. You can choose whatever. It's your choice to cultivate these or not, reject these. But this is the formula. So he says, but to warn of what happens when powerful knowledge is received by an unprepared mind, an unprepared ego. So, and especially when one is becoming aware of the unconscious structures of their own being, sometimes the ego is not ready. If there's a lot of confusion around certain ideas, let's say someone is genetically cannot have a child, which is a very sensitive topic, and the birth chart has certain things which they cannot have a child, let's say, which is absolutely one of the most difficult parts of Jyotish to understand. Coming to terms, that is, this is why I say grieving your own birth chart. There will be things that would never happen, and maybe they would. So that's the new one. So you have to also be like, maybe there is a possibility of that happening, but if it doesn't, and sometimes it does not, grieving your chart. So that's the part where the ego sometimes cannot handle it. The mind is not prepared to receive the things of Jyotish, and you'd be like, oh, I this is what's gonna come up in the next year. It's horrible. I don't agree with it. I reject it. So then you're not able to accept. And it's complex because then you're like, what is, then we get into the fate and free will conversation and a whole new debate starts. So that's why before we get into higher level, higher order of discussions, one must cultivate a basic level foundational understanding and build slowly into the more complicated, nuanced ideas, which require a lot of strength, mental strength to not break under the pressure of becoming conscious of certain ideas about the nature of reality and stuff. The result isn't just confusion, it is suffering both for the student and for those who come into contact with them later. So he writes, Nadeyam parashishya, Nadeyam parashishyaya nastikaya shathaya va datte pratidinam dukkham jayate natra sanshayah. So he says this knowledge must not be given to the disloyal student, the faithless, or the deceitful. If it is given to such a person, daily suffering arises. Of this, there is no doubt. Natra sanshayah. He says, I have no doubt that this will. He's like, this will happen for sure. If you give this knowledge, or if you this kind of person and receive this knowledge, you will be Jyotish will not help you. It'll reduce the quality of your life. This is not about gatekeeping, it's about karmic weight, the seriousness of the content and its implications. When Jyotish is taken in by someone whose inner posture is misaligned, it becomes distorted. It produces harm, not because the system is wrong, but because it is being misused by someone who cannot yet hold its implications. You see, so let's open up this sutra, different parts of the sutra. It says, let's look closely at the three qualities. Let's look closely at the three qualities that distort the transmission. Parashishyayaha, which is disloyal student or the student of another guru. This refers to someone who is unwilling to commit, who mistrusts the process, who resists guidance while pretending to follow it. This kind of student engages from a distance, never fully receptive, never truly surrendered to the learning, not to someone, to the process of learning itself, to the process of listening. And there can be complicated reasons. So sometimes these blocks have to be undone through the right kind of guidance, mentorship. Sometimes a person has maybe, if they learn and accept certain ideas about Jyotish and come to terms, like sort of uh, directly perceive how it's true. Empirically, they read the chant and something clicks. If something clicks in them, that's the word. It would lead to maybe a chaos. Some dam in the unconscious opens up. and that would probably lead them to make certain decisions, certain changes in their life that they're not ready to make right now. So maybe that's why they are parashishya. They are disloyal and they keep moving from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher. Maybe they are parashishya in this current age because the previous teacher betrayed them. And now you go to a teacher, and now this teacher is like, oh, you're that teacher's student. I don't want it. Or parashishya could be because you come up, you attend a lecture, but you're full of your own ideas. You already think you know about so many things, and what's being taught is not being received in its own found in it with its own foundations, with its own logic. It's being colored by what you know. So the person is just being like using what's being taught and qualifying it as the right understanding or wrong understanding with the yardstick of what they know. So they're just trying to qualify it. They're like, ah, Venus is this. Now this teacher says something about Venus or this kind of graha or that graha, that Shukra is like that or this. The student is like, oh, it's not like this because I know it's like that. So they've come up with their own mind. So cultivating a good teacher student relationship is so important. This kind of student engages from a distance, never fully receptive, never truly surrendered to the learning for different complex reasons. This fragmentation creates confusion. Jyotish, which reveals unity within complexity, cannot survive in a divided vessel. It is also someone who is initiated by someone else. This is a more complicated and nuanced bit because Jyotish used to be taught by people, enlightened sages like Sri Yukteswar Giri was the spiritual master of Paramahansa Yogananda was an Jyotishi. But we don't have enlightened Jyotishis right now in the world, as far as I can see. Though enlightened beings, in some sense, are Jyotishis themselves, but they don't probably use the language of what we use in Jyotish and the ways of understanding the structure of nature of time the way we are trying to do it. Uh, but anyway, so I'm sticking to the more mundane interpretation of Parashishya, Shishya, Parashishya. Um, it I'm sticking to the more mundane interpretation, for we have no such actual gurus available in Jyotish right now. The next word is Nastika, the faithless. This is not atheism in the modern sense. Nastika is also not the ones who don't believe in the authority of the Vedas. That's what Wikipedia, mundane interpretations, that's what a Western scholar book or these books written by the non practitioners uh, from an purely intellectual perspective would translate Nastika as, or the traditionalists who are uh, only living on the socio-cultural level of religion and not the practitioner level of the nuanced gnostic sort of deeper metaphysical level of of religion. It refers to the denial of the unseen order, the refusal to accept that life is governed by deeper laws than what meets the eye. And it's a stance in the sense of, even if it is true, for example, we all know meditation is beneficial even from a purely scientific angle, because of the amount of research that is done. The nastika becomes the person who still doesn't meditate. It's a stance of the ego, it's a positionality that the ego has taken. The self, there's the structure, the psychostructure has taken that stance. So we don't want to take the nastika stance. We want to have doubt, we want to have questions, but don't want to be this blinded person who's like, oh, meditation works and there's so much research, but I still don't meditate. I don't know why. So it's this unconsciousness, and this happens to all of us, including me. So no one's to blame here. There is fingers being pointed at the in all existence in itself, like the structure, that's the structure that we live in, that's how things are. So whom to blame, whom to not blame, I don't know. The Nastika sees Jyotish as a tool for control, prediction, or egoic gain. So that's another way to look at it. Nastika would be someone who is wanting to be like, oh, don't do this. It's going to be bad next month. Don't do it. So all this fear-driven astrology, this fear-mongering, and it's so common. Bad predictions. There'll be world war. There'll be this. There'll be earthquake. It's all nonsense. It's all Nastika. It's all people who don't have, who think they are gonna out, they are, the structure of reality is a structure given by a certain thing, a principle of some sort. The entelechy doesn't come from a, from the non-being, is being arises from non-being. So that unseen non-being, the non-dual state, is when you create fear in people's hearts using the light of Jyotish, basically in resistance to the way things are. And sometimes those things are very painful to us. Sometimes they're very pleasurable. When they're pleasurable, we are in agreement with the law, and when they are painful, we are trying to outmaneuver these things in life. It's an astikya state. We all have this. It's okay. Prediction, egoic gain, controlling, and things like that, having power over others, and these kinds of things. They want power, not understanding. And without astikaya, without trust in dharma, karma, and rhythm, in subtle structures of reality, because of this happens because of a lack of a proper mentor or a guru. Jyotisha loses its axis. It becomes mechanical, and it starts falling. It starts descending into the nether regions of our collective consciousness, let's say. Then the last one is very important, very interesting. Shata, deceitful. This is the most dangerous posture because it hides. The deceitful student performs sincerity. They're not actually sincere. They're saying that they're sincere. They study for status. They manipulate knowledge to appear wise or to gain influence or to feed subtle arrogance. They're not seeking truth. They're seeking advantage. And that poisons the very channel through which Jyotish must flow. This is also a very tough one. I don't know from what authority, what kind of adhikar can I speak of these kinds of things. I am Parashishya, Nastika, and Shata to the highest degree, probably. But I would say that these are the things that we must avoid to whatever degree possible, become aware of them to whatever degree possible in our studies. And it's just bringing, I'm just discussing these things because they're in Brihad Parashara or Shastra, they're important. They make so much sense. They're interesting ideas. They make, as long as they make sense to you, you should reflect on them more. If they don't make sense to you, reject them. No one forcing you. So these distortions are not rare. They are not out there. They live in all of us in small and large ways, depending upon where we are in the Ferris wheel of life, where we are in this Kala Chakra. Uh, some of these qualities are more in us. Some people have more good qualities, and they're glad about themselves. They're gladdened by their meritorious ways of living, and they have garvit. They're so proud of themselves, and some of us don't have them. Then we feel really terrible about ourselves and feel and then we end up getting cultivating these because we see the value in them, and the ones who are on top start falling down, and we're going in cycles of this merit, demerit, these kinds of things. So we must be willing to see them, name them, and refuse to feed them. To study Jyotish sincerely is not to pretend purity, but to become conscious of the subtle ways we distort truth and to actively turn away from them. Avoiding these patterns is not about earning worthiness, it's about protecting the sanctity of the transmission for yourself, for your future students, and for the darshan itself. Jyotish will not yield its deeper vision to one who seeks to use it. Philosopher's stone will not be given to those who wish to choose to use it through their egoic function for themselves. It will only be given to those who are selfless, to those to those who will use it for others. Even when I'm speaking about these ideas, I'm trembling in some sense because I'm like, how profoundly broken am I as a student of Jyotish itself? So while preparing this lecture itself, I had these moments, And now, while presenting this lecture itself, I'm having these moments where, wow, like there's such a long way to go. There's so much to cultivate in myself. I'm so not good. It is about protecting the sanctity of the transmission for yourself, for your students, future students, and for the darshana itself. It's so touching. Jyotish will not yield its deeper vision to one who seeks to use it, but to the one who seeks to align with it, it begins to speak. To the one who doesn't want to use it for their own personal gain all the time, not all the time, but even to any degree. It's for the one who wants to benefit others, to use it in a positive sense, not to fear monger and control and be like, I know you don't know, bad things are going to happen to you. You don't understand. Maybe that the person needs to do what they need to do. Maybe you don't know if it's the bad thing. Maybe that thing turns into a positive outcome. It's complex. It's super complex. Prarabdha is so complex. And there are many instances in Bhagavad Gita, in Mahabharata, in Ramayana, which a bad thing becomes a good thing becomes a bad thing. Who's to judge? From which context do we judge good and bad? That's the dharma sankat. That's the dilemma of any given context, any given situation. The amount of complexity and nuance and sincerity and humility that is required. That's why Parashara Rishi is telling us to cultivate these ideas so that we don't get lost while wanting to judge and wanting to analyze the the divine plan. We want to analyze and grasp through our limited ego function the entire structure of reality, the complex ways life is interacting. So the guru shishya approach to learning. So there are forms of knowledge that can be assembled. You read enough books, watch enough tutorials, practice enough repetitions, and the system becomes yours to wield. Jyotish can also do that. Many modern fields work this way. Jyotish, however, does not. You can do that in Jyotish while studying Jyotish. But if you really want to study Jyotish properly, it does not work this way. Jyotish is not self assembled knowledge, it is relational knowledge, which means it arises within relationship. This is not just with a person, but with a structure, a lineage, a living pattern of transmission. And lineage can just be you and Rishi Parāśara. His teachings, you're directly accessing the book, directly reading. It's not lineage through a living human being. Maybe you don't trust human beings at that much to at this moment, or when it comes to maybe there aren't trustworthy people to learn these kinds of things from. So this is why the tradition of Jyotish has always emphasized the Guru Shishya model, not just Jyotish. Guru Shishya model is as old as there was someone, as old as when the first moment of knowledge descended in some form from the primordial source of some kind. There was something that received the knowledge and something that put the knowledge out there. So this is why tradition of Jyotish has always emphasized a Guru Shishya model, not as a hierarchy of superiority. This is all Marxists kind of reading of power structures. It's a nonsense reading. Don't read it that way. But a posture of learning. It's a metaphysical, it's a psychological necessity. The guru is not a master dispensing facts. The guru is simply one who has entered deeper into pattern and knows how to point so that you don't waste time, so that you can move faster. You don't waste energy. You don't waste your attention, which are all precious time, energy, attention. The shishya is not a passive recipient, it's not a slave. The word itself comes from the root shash, meaning to discipline, to refine. A shishya is one who shapes themselves around the learning, who listens with the whole being, not just the intellect. This is not about personality worship. That's how the word guru evokes all these kinds of resistance in the modern world. You don't need to give your autonomy away, but you do need to understand that certain kind of knowledge don't reveal themselves to the isolated learner. It's also, even Parashara Hora is a conversation between Rishi Maitreya and Parashara. All ancient texts were written like a dialogue, the dialogue between a Maharishi Krishna and Rishi Arjun. the dialogues between Maharishi Gautama and his disciples, between Ananda. All different kinds of, all of them are dialogues. It's relational. You ask, you're curious, and it's given. Ask and it shall be given. This is not about personality worship. You don't need to give your autonomy away, but you do need to understand that certain kinds of knowledge don't reveal themselves to the isolated learner. They require proximity, dialogue, reflection, and return, repetition, reflection, and dialogue, conversation. And a lot of Jyotish study is being done in course formats, and teachers are not available. And and it's sad. The teachers are not, they're busy, they have their own ambitions, they have their own, they're busy doing different projects, they have their own families, and the dialogue doesn't happen. Students are also sometimes not sincere, and they haven't studied properly with the right mind, and they start a dialogue to, they come from this idea of wanting to just want attention, of this kind of this childish attention, where the questions you like, why are you asking this question? That means you've only listened to half of the lecture. So they listen to the half a lecture and then start asking questions. Attention span is low. uh, there's a sense of urgency, constant urgency. World doesn't feel like a safe place right now to many of us. So there's urgency, anxiety, nervous systems are dysregulated on a mass scale. There's mass psychogenic disorders of all kinds. So it's understandable that we are this way, but we need to become conscious and cultivate the right kind of student within us. So when you enter this posture, even internally, something will shift. You stop treating Jyotish as just another subject and begin to relate to it as a presence. You start to feel that teaching responds to you, that it meets you differently depending on your sincerity, your rhythm, your honesty. If you relax, attentive, and you completely go into a silent state, and then you start reading a sutra and you contemplate, you try to understand, you read through what has been taught to you by your teacher and things like that, you'll move faster. This is why some people read the same sutra for years and never hear it, and another hears it once and it transforms their life. It's not about intellect. It's about readiness. It's a heartfelt, it's a very subtle thing. And readiness is cultivated through right relationship with yourself also. The first right relationship is with yourself. That relationship doesn't need to be with a specific guru. It can be with a teacher, a text, a tradition, or simply with the darshana itself, with Jyotish itself. What matters is that it's approached with reverence and not just this idea of consumption. There's a blind consumption. This course and this series, what we're doing, and this entire YouTube channel, the Jyotish Project, is not here to entertain us. We are entertained because entertainment is not a bad thing. It's not even here to convince us, which is okay to be convinced by things, which is okay to persuade people into certain ideas. But that's not the ultimate purpose, the ultimate value. It's here to refine our seeing. My seeing as I present these ideas, your seeing as you enter into a dialogue with these ideas. And that refinement happens within a relationship between you and the teaching, between you and yourself. And that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate purpose of this. And finally, how to study Jyotish. So Jyotish is not linear content. It is not a fixed syllabus that once completed delivers mastery. It is a spiral, a pattern you enter, leave, and re enter at deeper levels. You'll study your grahas, you study your rashis, you study your bhavas, you study your shadbal, different avasthas, drishtis, all the relationships, dignities, interpretations of different kinds. And as you move through different gochara, different transits, and all of these knowledge that you've acquired, they'll start deepening with every chart, with every revisitation of an old concept, every confusion, every clarity, every mistake. You'll enter deeper levels of that understanding. If you approach it like academic material to be conquered, like I got trained, oh yeah, 4 years, 5 years, I did my degree, now I'm a trained dentist. Though dentists keep researching and keep working, quite intelligent medical practitioners usually, but a lot of professions like, oh, I just studied it once, now I don't need to do it. You're a lifelong student. With any profession, it should be like that ideally, but it's not the case for a lot of us. So if you approach it like academic material to be conquered, you'll find yourself lost in an ocean of terminology, techniques, and contradictions. But if you approach it like a living darshana, as a lens that reshapes your perception, then study becomes something more rhythmic, more contemplative, and more human, more heartfelt. So it's still intellectually demanding, it's still analytically demanding, but the ground is heartfelt. There's no single correct method, but there are a few principles that align with the nature of Jyotish itself. This is the most important one. The biggest mistake I made is move through it once and fast. Don't wait to be ready. Just begin, watch, read, observe, let the material wash over you. The first pass is not for mastery, it is for orientation. Don't grip too tightly. Let questions form. Let your mind stretch. You'll return later with sharper vision. Keep a Jyotish journal. This really helped me personally. This is not about detailed notes, though I handwrote every word that was spoken by my teachers. I handwrote everything that I studied, word by word. I enjoy writing a lot. This is not about detailed notes. This is about building a personal dialogue with the teaching. Write what moves you, what confuses you, what arises spontaneously. Carry that notebook with you. Over time, this record becomes your mirror. After 1 year, 6 months, open that notebook and go to that day that you dated, and the contemplations that you're making about Jyotish ideas, a graha, or something that came to you, some reflection that you made. So over time, this record becomes your mirror, not just of what you're learning, but of who you are becoming as you learn. It will also teach you your questions have evolved. The way you're answering those questions are also evolving. Repetition over novelty. So instead of always engaging, wanting a new idea, a new technique, a new something, repeat the basics. The basics themselves are profound techniques. If you know properly, if you learn just everything about the grahas themselves, that itself can give you so much understanding of Jyotish. The mind wants new content, but Jyotish opens through repetition. Read the same sutra again, watch the same lecture weeks later. What didn't land before will quietly unlock. What seemed abstract will begin to feel intimate. Don't get lost in the details. You don't need to memorize every Sanskrit term or planetary attribute right away. In fact, don't make it this hard initially. Let structure come first, the architecture of the system, the categories, and the relationships. Precision will deepen naturally through return. You become more precise over practice, over time. So don't get lost in details and fixate on something. Study in rhythm, not in haste. Even 20 minutes a day, if it's sincere, is more effective than hours of cram study. So, with the idea of Atomic Habits, the famous self help book, a little bit of practice every day becomes compounds to about 37 times more. That's the idea in Atomic Habits, as far as I can see, I can tell. Rather, if you just do 5 hours once a week, is not as effective as 20 minutes every day. It compounds to be 37 times better than hasty sort of this sort of focused over studying in one day. Meditating 10 hours a day or meditating 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day, the 10-minute part is better. So you get what I'm saying. It should be too many examples. It requires space between contact. Insight often happens between sessions, between lectures, when life suddenly echoes what the chart was pointing to. Ask questions, but don't demand answers. Don't demand answers. It's important. Let yourself be in uncertainty. Sit with confusion. Let it be confusing. A lot of things are open questions still in Jyotish. They will continue to remain open questions for me for a while, until one day they wouldn't. Ask your question, then move on. Often the answer arrives organically through experience or later study, through a client session, maybe, through another more advanced sutra, something basic becomes more clear. Trust the spiral, trust the delay. Studying Jyotish is not about speed. It's literally you're studying nature, you're studying Prakriti, and Prakriti takes its time. It's about right rhythm, right relationship, and right return. And most importantly, don't study as if you're separate from what you're studying. This will naturally, as we briefly touched upon this idea in lecture one, it will gradually just invade each other. You stop, the separation becomes less and less over time. You're not observing a system, you're observing your own field of experience reflected through a cosmic structure, through a certain metaphysical structure. That's why the study of Jyotish changes people, not because it gives them answers, but because it reshapes the very eyes that are seeing. So the questions itself change because the eyes themselves are seeing something else, a bit more. It's profound, to say the least. Your role as a student. This is something that I was never sort of. Uh, this conversation doesn't happen in most astrology circles, most teaching circles. In most modern learning systems, the question is, what will I get from this course? What skill will I gain? What outcome can I expect? What value does it offer? But Jyotish doesn't fit that logic fully. It will offer you value, it will give you certain outcomes, it will give you something. It isn't something you get through though. It's something you let get through to you. So it sounds poetic, but it is because it is heartfelt. That's why it's poetic. And so you see, ultimately, Jyotish will give you certain things, but eventually it'll get to you somewhere deep. It'll touch you somewhere deeper in your heart. You're not here to master Jyotish. You're here to let it restructure the way you perceive subtly, patiently, and thoroughly. This darshan doesn't deliver clear takeaways like a productivity course. It can, though. Instead, it opens a new kind of sight. It teaches you to recognize pattern in chaos, to sense rhythm in time, to witness karma, not just as consequence, but as architecture. And that teaching doesn't happen all at once. It requires a little bit of time. Not too much time, because we don't have that much time because we're busy, right? But it takes some patience. It unfolds over time through small shifts, small shifts. When you stop chasing answers, stop demanding answers, and begin asking better questions, which Jyotish will give you. This is what this capacity comes through Jyotish itself. When you stop needing certainty and begin tolerating complexity, your capacity to hold complexity increases, nuance increases, your patience increases a little bit. When you stop trying to fix life and start listening to it. Though chasing answers, needing certainty, and trying to fix life itself might be due to certain conditions in the birth chart, and it's important to work through these things. So, any issues that we have which are stopping our progress are part and parcel of our psychostructure. That's how we are designed. So, a lot of it is to work on ourselves. The more we work on ourselves, the more clear we become and break free from certain unconscious ways of being, the better our progress becomes as a student itself. We access Jyotish better. The more clearly you perceive, the better the quality of your Jyoti becomes. Your role as a student then is not to perform expertise, it is to become an observer, not of grahas, but of grahic perception itself. Not of others' charts, but of your own reflexes, reactions, and recurring patterns. Of your own chart itself has to be confronted, grieved, and accepted and worked upon. Jyotish will only reveal as much as you're willing to be seen by it. It's a very profound one. It's so important. Jyotish will only reveal as much as you're willing to be seen by it. And being confronted in that manner is not easy. And it's a slow process. It should be also ideally be done slowly. So what do you bring to the path? Sincerity, not only intensity; curiosity, not panic; not restlessness; return, not perfection; willingness, repetition, not perfection; willingness to be reshaped. Let the teachings meet you where you are at the moment. Let them grow with you. As you grow, the teaching will grow. And remember, every time you return, you're a different student. Every time you'll go back to a basic concept, you there's a ancient saying, right, from Greek, Greek saying, some sort of philosophical saying. You never step into the same river twice, for you're not the same person who stepped, and the river is not the same as well. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, because the river has moved, time has moved, and you've shifted in that time. Something in your thought changed, a new thought came. So when you revisit a beginner concept, a lecture, or any kind of understanding, it's a different, you've more life experience. Maybe you've suffered differently. Maybe you've understood something about yourself. So in Jyotish, if you've been sincere, will be a different teacher. So for a sincere person, Jyotish becomes a different kind of teacher. So what this lecture has shown us, finally, I know it's a long one again. All the lectures are long. I don't even need to say it anymore. I hope you're still listening. This lecture has not taught Jyotish. It has taught you how to approach Jyotish, not with haste, but with care, not with pressure to master, but with the intention to be shaped by it. We've seen that Jyotish is not merely a subject, just another subject. It is a darshana, it's a way of seeing. It's about consciousness. And like all vision, its clarity depends on not on the object that is being seen, but on the lens through which it is received. The lens itself is more important than the object. You'll only be able to see the object more clearly if the consciousness that is perceiving the object is clarified. The lens is clear, the thing that is being seen becomes more clear. You are the vessel that receives the teaching, and so you must be shaped not perfectly but sincerely in order for that vision to take root. So, there are certain things that need to be cultivated, certain things that need to be avoided, as the yamas and the niyamas. We've seen that the qualities that open the gate are peace, receptivity, truthfulness, and faith, not as moral demands but as perceptual capacities, foundations. The distortions that block the gate are doubt, resistance, and performance, not as flaws to be ashamed of, but patterns to outgrow. The true student is not one who memorizes, but one who aligns rhythmically, honestly, and humbly. Though memorization is a very important part as well. Smriti is a very important part as well. But just because you remember everything doesn't mean you understand things. Parrots also remember everything. So just parroting sutras doesn't mean that you understand things. Just because you know Sanskrit doesn't mean that you know Jyotish. Just because you can read Sanskrit doesn't mean you know understand Jyotish. If you translate someone who doesn't speak Sanskrit at all and have just worked themselves through the translations, good translations, can know much better Jyotish. That Jyotish will study you as much as you study it. So thank you so much for this, for being here, for listening, and for wanting to study Jyotish to whatever capacity. This series, how this was the second lecture of how to study Jyotish series, and I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you so much.